Hey guys, this is Curtis, Urostomy for Life, and I'm gonna do this video basically for right around when I was age 3 and I was having my urostomy procedure done. So if you remember from the last video, the surgeon and the team out at Lackland Air Force Base in San Antonio wanted my parents to take me home and let me grow until around age 3, and then they were going to set up a time for them to do the surgery and bring us back from we lived in Melbourne, Florida at the time, just outside of Cocoa Beach, which is right next to Cape Canaveral and Patrick Air Force Base. So I believe it was just after Christmas in 1966 that they decided to fly me out from Patrick Air Force Base on a military air evac or medevac. Basically, what was happening with the war still kind of going on. They were shuffling soldiers to and from that were wounded or flying back out for going back to battle. And so my mom and I were able to catch one of those flights out. And so we flew out of Patrick Air Force Base and we landed in Montgomery and stayed overnight. And then we flew on to Lackland Air Force Base in San Antonio. So the surgery was done right at the first part of January, for when I was told. And the surgery was about 8 to 9 hours long, which was the best recollection from my mom and my dad during the stories when they told me, and they told me over and over again as I was growing up. When I was finished with the surgery and the doctor came out and talked to him and everything had gone okay, at that point in time, anesthesia was still working with me. And when anesthesia was taking the breathing tube out, or they call it extubation, when they were taking the breathing tube out, my airway closed off. And so with that, they had to do, and if you can see right here, it's one of my 2 neck scars. This was one from 3 years old. So they had to do an emergency tracheostomy on me because I had closed off after the long surgery. The only thing they can, I guess, try to pinpoint why would be laryngospasms because of the anesthesia. And back then they used ether. And showing my age, ether was given through a mask, and the mask they had at the time was made of rubber material. It was black rubber. I can remember it. If I sit down and I think hard enough, I can actually visualize the mask coming back over my nose, even though I was 3 years old. And I can remember the smell of ether. I can make myself remember that, and it just comes out in my brain, and I can actually smell it. And I can remember fighting for a little bit of time trying to get that mask off my nose, and the anesthesiologist or the nurse anesthetist was holding it on my face, and then someone else would take my hand, and after a couple of breaths, I was out. So with that, I got a tracheostomy. I stayed in the hospital until probably late February, early March was the best recall that Mom and Dad had since it was so long ago. Mom was really good about getting records from the military, and I have a few of them that are dated right around that time. And but then a few of them were basically disintegrated over time. They were on carbon copy papers where when the person who was transcribing on the good old-fashioned typewriters, there would be the original copy, which would be paper, and then behind it was several copies or triplicates, which the Army and the Air Force and all was famous for back then, were on a thinner sheet of paper, and those pieces of paper were notorious for breaking down. I have a few of them that has made it through the years, but some of them have been lost. So I get done with the surgery and I recuperate. And again, I'll tell you more stories about when I was in the hospital during that period of time. And it was about a 2-month period of time. And then they decided to send us home. So we repeat the trail that we followed to get out there, and we got on a medevac plane, and we took the jump from San Antonio back to Lackland Air Force, not to Montgomery, to the Air Force Base in Montgomery, and stayed overnight there. And then again from there, jumped on a medevac plane from Montgomery back down to um, Patrick Air Force Base, right outside of Cape Canaveral. So we're on the flight, and I'm 3 years old, and I apparently enjoyed flying, from what I understand. And on the way back, my mom had me dressed with just a t-shirt over a diaper. And the reason for that is that if I wore pants, that the waistband was going to be too tight on my surgical scar, and they didn't want that to come apart. So she just kept me in a diaper. I did have a pair of socks on, and I did have a pair of shoes on. But that was basically what she had me dressed in. We talked about it, what the weather was like and things like that. And apparently it wasn't cold enough for them to worry about having to have a jacket and stuff on during that period of time. So, okay. We're flying, and apparently I'm going up and down the aisle of the plane, and there are multiple young soldiers on the plane with us, and I made myself known to many of them. And Mom tells me that I came across one soldier who was pretty banged up, and she describes the guy as being early 20s, probably somewhere between 20 and 25 to her best guess, and that he was wearing, back in the day, soldiers at the medical hospitals would walk around in pinstripe. That was kind of an off-white and then blue pinstripes pajamas. And then they would have a military assigned or military robe to go over it. And as I was a patient in the hospital, I can remember seeing, and I was on the pediatric wing, I could see gentlemen walking around, and occasionally, again, females. They weren't quite as prevalent back then, but I would see the GIs walking around in these pinstripe pajamas, so I knew they were patients. So this gentleman was dressed in the pajamas that I told you about, and he was walking with crutches, and apparently he had one leg that was bandaged up pretty heavily. At the end of the flight, we're flying into Patrick Air Force Base. He and I, befriended each other, and so we're buddy buddies. And right as we were getting ready to, we were landing, taxiing, getting ready to get off, he brings out a Purple Heart. And this is one of his Purple Hearts. So he pins it on my diaper. And I run back, and I show my mom, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this guy pinned this medal on me. I've got a medal. I'm special. And my mom, for the life of her, tried to give it back and say, no, this is too important for you. We can't take this. Please take it back. And his response to this was, he deserves it. I have 2 more to take home with me. So this gentleman had 3 Purple Hearts. So he got wounded 3 different times in action at such an early age. So over the years, his name is Ron Phillips. Now, it could be Ronald, Ronnie. My mom wrote down Ron Phillips. And multiple times over the years as I was growing up, she would tell me the story. And all we knew was that when we were getting off the plane at Patrick Air Force Base, Ron Phillips was continuing the flight to South Florida. And the best that we can come up with is he was flying into Homestead, being that that's the biggest military base, or the military base in the lower part of Florida. Mom kind of recalls the conversation, and she asked, well, where's home? And he said, well, it's in South Florida. I'm flying down there, and then I'll make my way back home. So he was somewhere in that lower Florida area was home for Ron. Never did find out exactly where. So I take this to school multiple times during my elementary and junior high school years, whenever they would have show and tell or something of interest, those kind of things. I would write my essays about it, those kind of things. If I had to do a report, a person who moved me in my life, then Ron would be the gentleman that I would choose. And I was always able to bring this Purple Heart to school and show it off. And it sits on my desk. So as I'm talking to you and I'm at my desk, Ron's Purple Heart remains right here beside me. It's been in my back. When I didn't have a desk when I was younger and the desk wasn't that important to me, I would keep it in a chest of drawers in the top drawer. And so I was always had easy access to it. And probably once or twice a month, I would see it and I would kind of flip it open and go from there. There's no markings on the back of this that say anything about who it was given to, why it was given for. We know why, or any kind of date or anything like that. But we do know that he had 3 of them and that he was flying back into Florida and South Florida in probably somewhere between late February to March timeframe was when he was going home. So what I've done over the years, I contacted Montel Williams. He used to be a gentleman on TV. I contacted Oprah Winfrey's show. I contacted Phil Donahue's show. I wrote letters because that's what we did back in the day. There was a TV show back in the early 2000s that was on one of the TLC or something like that channel, that they found lost relatives, and I actually wrote to them, and I did that. I was the only one I ever got a response back from that did say they were interested. They talked to me over the phone and got a little more information. They said that it was kind of a stretch because mainly they were keying in on finding lost relatives and not so much non-relative people, but it was a very interesting story, and they would get back to me, and I never heard back from them. In the somewhere around the 2007, 2008 range, I did call and talk to the Miami Herald, which did do about a half a page story trying to find Ron Phillips, to no avail. I've talked to multiple veterans of foreign wars offices in the Florida, all the way from the Panhandle on down. But I tried them, and they put out information in their newsletters and things of that nature. The last big push that I tried was just about 6 months ago, and I finally got a hold of someone from the Veterans Administration I think it was in Gainesville or Tallahassee. But anyways, I was able to converse by email to the director, and she was able to look and find what she thought was 15 Ron Phillips, somewhat in the Florida from Orlando down, that would be in that age range and possibly meeting that criteria of what we were looking for in 1967. And we talked back and forth, how are things going, and over a period of about 2.5 months, she finally got back and said that they reached out to several Ron Phillips. There were no answers, or phone numbers had been changed. But the general thing was they were not the right Ron Phillips that had 3 Purple Hearts or was on any kind of medevac flight coming into Patrick Air Force Base in early 1967. I tried to look on Purple Morph. It's the military order of the Purple Heart. I couldn't find him there. The only thing I haven't done, and I found out recently, is I could possibly try to either contact or write to St. Louis for potential records. But again, I'm not sure, since I'm not family, if they'll do that for me or not. So I'm reaching out to you guys because I see so many people find relatives or find people on YouTube and on the internet. So I'm asking you to look for Ron Phillips. Again, military. Mom believes he was in the Army. He was between 20 and 25 in 1967, so he would be late 70s, going into his 80s with that. And again, three Purple Hearts, giving one away to a 3-year-old on a plane coming back into Patrick Air Force Base. If you can help me out, you've got my email, and you can get back to me. I'm also on Facebook if you want to look me up there. But I really would appreciate the help if you could make this go viral so that I can find Ronnie Phillips. Ron Phillips, South Florida, 1967, military, 3 Purple Hearts, gave one away to me. And I would love to return his medal to him and close this chapter, but also get to meet him and know that I made it. And I'd like to know if he made it. If he's passed away and you're the family of Ron and we can kind of validate that somehow, I'd be glad to give you his Purple Heart back as well, and complete his legacy for you guys, because I imagine that it would be a treasured item of his. So again, please help me find Ron Phillips, 1967, Florida, Purple Heart, and I'd be glad to talk to anybody that comes up with some information. For now, that's it. Talk to you later.